Welcome to the Honest Business Podcast. This is the show for ambitious, value-driven business owners who are actively building a business that works for them. Hi, I'm May James, and I'm here to make scaling your business easier and more rewarding than ever. Each week, we will dive into simple, sustainable strategy and pragmatic leadership discussion to support you as you take imperfect action on your entrepreneurial journey. If you want to stay ahead, exceed your growth goals, and have a purposeful, thriving business, then keep on listening. Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. Welcome to another kind of festive episode, I suppose. This is coming to you between Christmas and New Year. I hope you've had a fantastic Christmas and I hope you are gearing up and ready for, well, bringing in the new year, seeing in the new year, whatever the kind of right terminology is. And if you are listening after the fact, I hope you are having a lovely new year. So this episode today is part 2 of the 55 business trend predictions for 2023. If you haven't listened to part 1, please go and listen to that because they both come with warnings and contexts and like disclaimers which are in the first episode, the part 1. So I'm not going to repeat them again. Go and listen to that. The same applies for this. We're going to pick up where we left off, which we finished on 29. So that means we're at number 30. I will dig right in and try and make this as short as possible. So the next trend that I see happening is the 3 or 4 day work week online. So in the online space, and this is not new, right? And most of this stuff is not new. It's about what is kind of coming up and being the thing of the moment. I think more and more people are going to move away from saying that they have support for programs 5 days a week and actually turn it into 3 or 4 days a week. Now we've been doing this the whole of this year. We started it, I think, I don't know, definitely all of this year. I don't know if it was, we started it in 2021, we members did, but as a business, I made the decision of there was no client support happening on a Friday anymore, which worked really well. People don't need it. It was fine. And we run on a 4 day work week in terms of client support. So that's people who have like access to Voxer or Slack. That was something that I decided to do. I think that's going to catch on a lot more, and I think a lot more people are going to choose to do that. I think the whole premise around it is it can be less time, but it's way more impactful, and actually people want to start using alternative support containers for things that actually really help people. So rather than it just being an ongoing chat and an ongoing kind of this, that, and the other, it really instead allows for the kind of conversation that goes on in these containers to be really high impact. And actually, you know, I've tested it as a business, but many others have found that you don't need it. I've actually had it before. So some clients I have, they only have 1 day a week and they have 1 day a week access to me, and that works as well. Like, it doesn't need to be this really intense thing, but I think that will really kind of come into its own. And I think we'll stop seeing people advertising things as 24/7 support, which really annoys me because like it's not 24/7 unless you've got someone, you know, you're paying someone for 24-hour coach support or whatever you're kind of selling. It isn't 24/7. I think this year we saw that a lot of people moved away from that messaging, and then as I said, I think next year we're going to move more into less is more and the kind of mentality around that. So that's kind of interesting. Number 31 is this Instagram website vibe feed thing. So what I mean by that is there's a real shift, I believe, in terms of looking at, you know, multi-channel marketing, and when we look at how are people using channels to connect the buyer's journey together and, you know, getting people to move from platform to platform. Instagram and the way we use that has changed this year and is going to continue to change as we go into 2023. I think a lot of people will start to adapt, especially if it's a service-based business, this idea that you can have a static feed, and when you go on someone's profile, it can be a kind of website format almost, basically, as soon as you land on the feed. So instead of it just being a load of content, it's content that's curated as basically like the information that's on your website, but in a really engaging way that people want to binge and they want to look at. And this is going to be really huge for next year, I think, personally. It's something that we have been looking into and has kind of been on the radar, and we are committing to giving it a go and seeing and trying some stuff out, and we've kind of integrated our strategy for next year, and I'm very much excited about it because I think it provides a lot of freedom to people. It's great if you want this kind of like slow, sustainable growth, if you are into kind of really manageable social media and doing social media in a way that feels good for you, especially if you're someone who can't put out content every single day. Like, this is a real flip and change from that. And, you know, it's got pros and cons, but I think it's a very exciting time. At the end of the day, the buyer in this day and age today wants to just see everything in one place. They don't want to go with multiple different things. If you can get them on Instagram, it makes sense to just keep them on Instagram, have them on there. They can see everything they need to see, and then they can take the next step. So I think this is exciting. I think it's a good trend, and it'll be really exciting to see how that will progress. I also think what you will then see is there's massive opportunity for, if you're listening to this and you're a social media manager, create this as a service for people. Like, we looked at that when we as a business were deciding on this. I looked for people who specialise in that, like buying basically a package where they'd make it for us. Now, we didn't go with it. There was one person I found who was doing it, but there's a massive room there for growth and opportunity in sales. So if that is something in your arena, whether you are a website, I suppose it's less so for the website designers, although it could, work to some degree, but it's mostly for the social media managers and the marketers. I'd really be offering that as a done-for-you service next year, and I think you'll get a lot of take-up on it. Very interesting, there's a lot that can come from that, is what I'm essentially saying, of like, yes, one thing is just that this is like a feed vibe and things, but then there's also a whole other thing about what can come from that. Continuing on with websites, number 32 is this idea that websites turn into an e-commerce kind of social media site, which some of you are going to be like, what do you mean? So what I'm essentially saying is the traditional website, I think, is going to then also mirror looking like social media. Now, I'm not sure, whether this is a good thing or not is a different conversation, but you're going to have a lot of UGC, user-generated content, on everybody's normal websites in a vertical way, and people building websites vertically to kind of really connect with customers on a deeper level. And there's some really cool brands who do this now and are doing it really well, and I think that's going to continue to grow. This year we saw the thing of everybody putting video, because everyone was like, actually, we understand now, we need a video. But this is going to kind of progress, and actually we're going to see that there's much more kind of UGC reviews, very like tactile stuff to help people with their buying process and their buying journey. And I think that's very interesting, and ultimately will massively help conversion. And I think the people who really value that and invest in it will see a big return. People really want new stuff. They're sick of seeing the normal Shopify template that, is good, it's all right, but I think this provides a kind of opportunity for people to really stand out and create something that people actually want to share their stuff. Like, they want to find the item page, send it to their friend and be like, look at this cool thing, look at this content, this is with someone wearing it, this is with someone out to dinner. All of that stuff is really key, but I think it's going to be integrated more than ever. Number 33, this is back to kind of coaching and business development. There is going to be a shift next year, I believe, to kind of coach loyalty. We have seen it at the back end of this year, and there's going to be not so much swapping around. I think what is going to happen is curiosity is why people shop around, right? So people often find a coach, and it depends, right? Some people swap around and shop around for coaches because they haven't found a decent one. So that's the number one, and that's totally relevant and fair. Other people shop around because the curiosity kills them. They're like, what possibly can be? The it coach of the moment, the person who's making loads of money. It's like, well, what are they doing? Like, what do we not know? What are we doing wrong? What is this not happening? Like, if I only knew this one thing that they're shouting about on their social media, then I'm going to know it and I'll have all the answers, yeah? That is all very superficial, it's all very exciting, it's attractive, it's fun, it's unique, it's exciting. And so that is curiosity. It creates curiosity. It's very good marketing, it's very good sales. And, people buy into that. However, I do think next year we're going to see a real rebellion from that. And I think it's going to take a bit of time. It might be that it's the end of 2023 that we really see it in a full capacity. But there is going to be this shift towards understanding and people finally seeing the value. And I say finally, like really pained, because I feel like it's something I've been banging on about for bloody years, but hey ho, it's okay. These things take a while for people to catch on to. People are going to start seeing the value in staying with one person, someone understanding their business, what that means, how transformational that is. And what I think people have misunderstood about that in the past is that people have felt like that means that you have to stay with the same person on the same package forevermore. And I think what you need to realise is that that's not the case. And like, for me, I've been trailblazing that for, forever since we started the business, of the fact that one, people can come and they can leave and they can come back. They don't have to stay constantly, because for some people in their businesses and what their goals are, they don't need to. We've also been a champion and tried to really push this idea that I don't create a value ladder, and people talk about creating value ladder in terms of building business offers as this kind of step-by-step thing. If you get person to buy the first thing and then they buy the fifth thing eventually, and that's the customer lifetime value and this whole thing, right? That is not something I've done. I've tried to reverse that, and we've flipped that. So my kind of process and kind of ideology is someone comes at stage 5, say, someone comes and buys one-to-one and buys an expensive package. I want people to go down the steps. Now, it's not as easy as that in the sense of we don't have a plan for everyone, and everyone doesn't have to go down X, Y, and Z thing. Like, I'm a bespoke creator and curator, right? I create stuff that people need and want in their business. You are not going to find someone that's more bespoke, I would argue, than me in terms of creating stuff that people actually need for their business on a one-to-one basis, on a consultant basis. But what I am a real champion of is that if someone comes and does one-to-one with me, they don't have to stay there forever. They can still have me as their coach, as their advisor, as their consultant, but they can be different options and different things, and I'm really flexible with that. And that has been something that has worked tremendously well, but isn't popular in the space. Now, coming back to this idea of coach loyalty, for me, in order for that to fully work, it's like you have to be, intelligent about it and make sense with it. Many people won't be, so it'll just be a straight slap of a thing of like, everyone will be like, okay, you've got to stay with your coach and that's trendy, blah, blah, blah. We've already been one step further and ahead for however long, because people will miss that nuance of like, actually, it's not about people staying in stale containers and like staying stuck. It's about people getting what they need. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes people need to do and can benefit from the same container for years. That's fine. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but I'm just saying nobody's going to fit every single box and nobody's one thing. So if I've got 3 clients, one of them needs to pay the full rate for one-on-one and needs the full one-on-one support for 3 years in a row. The other person needs 6 months of that, then followed by 3 months of something else, and then 12 months of something else. The other person is like a straight, just needs to see me once a month, and that's all they need. Like, this is where really creating something that makes sense for the specific business is like so powerful, but not everyone kind of sees that or gets that. But I do think there's going to be a real shift in that narrative of people finally understanding that buying more and more and more of the same thing, or more and more random programs from random people, is probably not what they need, and they actually need to sit down and take it seriously and find someone who actually knows what they're talking about and really can support them across a variety of topics. Number 34, we're going to talk about this is a potentially triggering one for people, but hey, let's go there. Number 34 is about nervous system regulation. So nervous system regulation is something that's been talked about a lot this year. I think it's not going anywhere. I think that's going to continue, and I think it'll come in a bit of a deeper, better thought out context, which is really great. However, my point of this is not necessarily that. It's about selling. So nervous system regulation is going to be used as like a selling point to make people feel better. Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of talk around how this is going to really help your nervous system, and this is going to do this, and this is going to do that. And that's fine. My issue, and the kind of thing that we need to watch out for and look at, and I think you'll see is trending very often, is that the same narrative will be used even though they push out a new offer every single week to encourage you to buy. So there's going to be this very, I've mentioned before about how shorter term, shorter length containers are going to be popular, and lower ticket stuff potentially is going to be popular. That was in part 1. What the knock-on of that is that often people are selling stuff all the time, and that's good. I'm the first person who sits and says to you all, like, sell every day, you have a business, you should sell. What is going to be very interesting is the execution of how you sell multiple things at once is done very badly most of the time. The way that it's, how do you market constant new offers? Again, difficult, I'd argue, to do well. And people struggle with that. And so what you're going to end up with is a very interesting kind of mashed together thing from a lot of people. And then what'll happen is, to kind of like seal the plaster on top, it's almost like a band-aid against the whole lot, is they're going to use nervous system regulation as this like amazing thing of like, oh my goodness, this is going to so help you with your like calming your nervous system, and you're going to do this for this thing and that for that thing. And this is going to help your business, and this is going to help your life. And yeah, this is all cumulative, and you need these 6 different courses because you just do. But then they're going to like, it completely contradicts itself in my opinion. But that's something that's going to be very interesting to watch play out. And I can almost guarantee you that will be coming in hot, probably from about February onwards. And I think until at least probably August. And then something will happen where everyone's like, oh, that was really weird. Yeah, why were we doing that? So let's see on that one. Number 35, leadership will become the next big thing, even though there are very few leaders. That's what I wrote on my phone. And that kind of sums it up, really. Leadership has been starting to come through the cracks of being a kind of topic to speak about, but nowhere near to the capacity it's going to. It's going to explode. Like, I'm talking, it's going to really, really just go wild. And this happened, yeah. This is part of a normal trend cycle. It's part of a normal kind of systemic industry basis of something that it's a concept. It's not new. It's been there for centuries and generations and decades, and it will continue to be. But I definitely feel in 2023 there's going to be a lot of leadership chat. There's going to be a lot of leadership chatter from people who have absolutely zero clue what they're talking about, or, you know, very narrow, limited expertise in, should we say. And that's not me saying that to dismiss that from people. Everyone should speak on something that they feel passionate about. My issue is people teaching leadership when they don't understand it. That's where the line gets a bit difficult. It's like, you can talk on it and you can share your opinion and things, but then it's when people then start teaching on it, and what that will manifest as, and what I mean by that is, people will start taking leadership based programs and events and, you know, offerings, and then 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, a month down the line, will then also then regurgitate the information or change it or add to it or kind of put their own sprinkle on it, and that then be their next program. And this is where we end up with a real negative lack of nuance, lack of depth, understanding around a topic. And yeah, that I feel that is gonna happen. You know, there are some fantastic leaders in the world today, some that are well known in the public eye, and many, many, many who are not, and no one knows about them. You know, maybe they're not even known in their industry. There's some great people who could do some incredible leadership training and support and help, and I hope that comes through next year, because leadership is so important. And it's something that for me this year, 2022, has been a massive theme with clients, those who are scaling and who are really growing. You know, it's often the topic of our conversation. It literally can be the whole of our work, you know, months and months on end. It doesn't go away, it doesn't disappear. It's a constant task, and that's exciting, but it's also difficult. And so leadership is incredibly important, and I've had some really interesting conversations and supported like a vast array this year of different leadership situations and groups, from like very small business to how do you lead yourself, to how do you lead your community, how do you lead a paid community, how do you lead your clients, to then also managing and helping leaders who are leading multi-million pound massive projects and work for, you know, the biggest certain companies in the world that I can't name, but, you know, like massive, huge national organisations and international organisations. Like, I've seen a lot of different aspects of that this year, and it's been very interesting to see, and people are crying out for good leadership. You know, as a generation, we are crying out for it. As a society, we are. As a country in the UK, we are. Like, leadership is a real massive thing that is going to get kind of bigger next year. Number 36, people are going to start discounting. That's going to be a very interesting one. This is obviously linked to the recession, potential recession, current recession, depending on, you know, what your position is on that. And there's going to be some very interesting discounting things going on. And when I say interesting, I don't mean that in a good way. You know, my personal view is that it's not a good move. I'm not saying you can't ever discount. I'm not saying you shouldn't. There's so much nuance to that. You know, if you need to discount, you need to discount, fine. But in terms of strategy and being strategic, there's a lot of issues with unplanned, you know, not strategic, just random discounting. My biggest kind of keynote from that would be that people do it too quickly, too fast, too heavy. And that is my ultimate tip for that. I'm not against you discounting 100%. I'm also never going to sit here and say, yeah, like, totally do it. But, you know, I do it once a year for a program, and I really enjoy doing that. It's very strategic and it's very purposeful, and a lot of time goes into it. But yeah, just don't do too much, don't do it too quickly, and don't do, you know, it massively, people underestimate the impact this has on your brand. They underestimate what it does for your business. They underestimate what it means for your customer and consumer and their relationship with you. It goes way deeper than the price that someone pays, and way deeper for the handful of people who buy what it is you're massively discounting. Number 37, I will try and go quicker because I've just realised we're like 20 minutes in. We've only done like 6. Oh, goodness me. I hope you're enjoying this. Right, let's talk about AI, artificial intelligence, and chat GPT and shortcuts and things. So, for those who don't know chat GPT, I just want to say I'm not an expert and I'm not claiming to be an expert on it, but it's essentially an AI system and a program that's been written and created where it's bizarre, it's so clever. You type things in and it basically talks back to you. You know, it's like a robot, it's like the future, it's whatever. There's been a lot of conversation around what does that mean for businesses, people panicking, people then saying you can make businesses from it, and there's a whole conversation around it. And I don't want to go into it because that's a whole podcast, but what I want to just touch on is, this is my opinion, right? This is not fact, but this is my opinion. In my opinion, the tech is still not there. It's still not advanced enough yet. I'm not saying it never will be, I'm just saying right now I don't think it is enough. I think it's a fantastic... AI is amazing, and chat GPT particularly is fantastic for people who need it, who wouldn't otherwise be able to do things. I think for life, it's just amazing. For those of you, for context, right, you can get it to write a covering letter, you can get it to write a CV pretty much, you can get it to, essentially get legal advice. Now, is it obviously the best legal advice? No. Is it something that I'd recommend people do? No. But it's going to give people who maybe don't have a voice, don't have access to certain things, can't do things for certain reasons, huge amounts of kind of independence, massive benefits. So I am not against it at all because I think there's massive good can come from it and it's a good tool. I think... But I don't see, I'm not panicked. Like, I don't get the panic. I also don't agree with this idea of, I've seen some stupid videos of people being like, set up a business and make millions off GPT because you can, what was it they were saying? Basically like how you could be a social media manager and it can create like 60 posts worth of content for you around a particular topic in the space of 3 minutes, and that's amazing, right? But we also know that Google's already come out and said, look, from an SEO perspective and from an everything perspective, do not, anything that is AI generated will immediately be flagged and, not pushed out and is really not good for your site. So you definitely don't want to be writing your website copy on it or blog posts on it, but everyone's like, oh, you can write all your blog posts. Now, am I saying that it'll never work? No, but I'm saying for the next year, it's definitely not going to happen. In the sense of it being something I would recommend for people to use. As it learns more about us as individuals and, as it becomes personalised, then yes, I can understand how that would work. But if you put, and people have tested this, right, if you put something that ChatGPT has created and you put it into a kind of spam checker, it will flag as AI generated. Of course it will. And, Google have said clear and plain and simple that they are not, and Facebook as well, I think, or Meta, sorry, are not interested. They're not playing game with that. And, why should they? It makes complete sense to me. So, yeah, I think there's a lot more to come from AI. I think there's so much that's there. I don't think it needs to be a panic of like, oh, lawyers are going to be made to have no jobs and this person's going to have a job and this person. Like, I just think people need to chill out. What I do think it's going to do, though, is change relationships. And it's going to really kind of show that surface level people are not going to win. And I've said this for years and years and years, and this is going to just come out and further prove it. Like, you've got to have an idea, you've got to be a thought leader. You don't have to be a thought leader, but you've got to have something to say that is not the same tripe that's being talked about all the time. And that's why I'm not scared by it, because I'm like, this is good, because it means people like me who have real ideas and real thought and real innovation and know shit are really going to shine, because that is the difference, where it's like the cream rises to the top. And unique personal opinion and ideas will always stand out and will always kind of win longer term. It's also, for me, with this AI stuff, it's also about strategy, right? This is another reason and kind of thing how strategy will always win and strategy will always make sense, because you can have all the content in the world, but if it's not curated, it doesn't make sense. It's very limited, yeah? Even if you can get the chat GPT to... you could say to it, write a strategy, and it'll write a strategy, but it's writing a strategy based on a specific strategy that's already made sense, right? But the whole point about strategy is innovation, or a lot of the time it is, not always, but, a lot of the time it's about bespoke and mixing and matching things and putting things together, and that the technology isn't there yet. So, as I said, I'm not against it, and I definitely think there's more conversation to be had around it. I'm also not the expert in it, but it's an interesting thing to look at and kind of look at where does that go and what does that mean for your industry. Number 38. Oh, this is going to be an interesting one. So, $1 million branding and messaging is going to continue to grow. So, and it depends if you're like in the online world and online business world, but in the online business world, there's a lot of chatter about $1 million this and $1 million that and $1 billion whatever, but there's a lot of talk about millions, right? And can I just say as well, I'm not against that. It's not my style, but I'm not against it. Each person to their own, like, do whatever you want to do. I love that women are talking about money, great, like, fine. Do I think we all have to? No, but if someone wants to, then, good for you. That's going to continue to grow. I think in 2023, that's going to become louder, mainly because it's kind of an easy sell, if I'm honest. Like, it's a really, really easy sell. But the problem's going to be that it's going to make the online industry feel and look even more scammy than it already does, which is not the best and is not great. It can be done well, and I'm not saying that everyone who does use $1 million messaging and branding, like, I'm not saying that it's all horrendous, but I'm just saying that it can easily fall into the not great kind of side of things, and it's very difficult to manage that. When I'm talking about $1 million brand, just for context for anyone, I'm just basically meaning where people talk quite openly about, I'm a millionaire, or I've made £10 million, or I've done this, or I've done that, and it's all about money, and it's about these massive figures, right, that emotionally, going back to nervous system regulation, really disrupts the nervous system, right? And that can be great because like, people want to celebrate what they've done, and that's fine. But there's it's a very difficult, in my personal opinion, again, this is my opinion, it's very difficult to keep right and to make it sound classy, if we want to say classy. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's a difficult one. But, however, this is not my full point. My full point is, in 2024/2025, it's going to switch. So what I think is going to happen is, it then will become like quiet luxury vibe. It'll become kind of old money style. It'll become like, oh, it's so cringe and new money to kind of talk about this $1 million this, $1 million that, and it's going to switch to, which I can't wait for, I really can't, where switch to this kind of different ideology where it's more chilled out, and it's more like, oh, this person knows what they're talking about, oh, and they also seem to have this nice thing, and they like nice things and they like that, but it's not the main topic of conversation, and that is really exciting, and it's really, I think that's good, because I don't know, for me the like $1 million thing doesn't really do it for me, but I know for many people it does. So yeah, 2024 2025 there's going to be a real shift, I think, and a kind of different sort of outtake on things. Whew. Sorry if I'm talking fast. Feels like I'm talking quite fast. I haven't got a drink. I could do with a drink. You can't see me, but I could kind of do with a drink. Number 39. I don't want these to sound really negative, by the way. I am sorry, but 39 is about twisting reality. This is going to become bigger and bigger, definitely. So it's like, people won't, they don't lie. It's not like they're fully lying, but they're like twisting and bending what they want to say to kind of make it work for them. And that's always like a difficult one, isn't it? Because it's like, oh, so instead of saying like the average client result is X, or the worst case scenario is this and the best case scenario is this, it's like people then try and just like make things sound a certain way and kind of manipulate things, or use one case study out of 500 and very, it's not like bad, it's just a bit like, ooh, okay. And for people who are very not new to the space and have been here a while and have been around the houses, they kind of see straight through it, or not straight through it, but they kind of think, right, okay, but what else? And yeah, that can be kind of hard. And what I mean is, I'm not talking just about like someone using one case study and that being a bad thing. Like, that's not a bad thing. Like, I don't share a lot of case studies, mainly because I don't work with a lot of people. Like, I work very closely with a small amount of people, so I don't have like hundreds and hundreds of different case studies to share. And then obviously the people who do have that, they can't be posting it every single day or 4 times a day, so inevitably the argument is they're never going to get through them all anyway, right? So I totally get this idea of like cherry picking results. But what I think the issue is, and what the trend will be next year, is where they're going to then like name programs essentially after someone has done something once. And this is the issue in my head. It's like, so what I mean is, someone can like help someone do something, and then that becomes a piece of content that's like, ooh, this is really juicy in a headline, and then that goes down really well. So then they create like a course or a program or a workshop or a masterclass around the thing, and then it kind of becomes out of context, and they then become an expert in, or not an expert's the wrong word, sorry. They become known, or even an authority, should we say, for this random thing, and it all becomes very discombobulated, and then the strategy piece completely just pees out the window because they then end up being like, oh, I didn't want to get here and now I'm here. That's me going into it a bit too much, but that is something I think we're definitely going to see. Number 40 is more people defaulting on payments. This is going to be big. So, people default on payments, and that is something that happens all the time, but I think next year we're going to see that more and more and more, particularly when people are buying into something and they don't really actually know what they're buying, or they kind of, half-arsed, or they then get sold on one thing and it's actually another. I don't, to be fair, I also don't think that's appropriate to me. I find it very difficult when people are defaulting on payments. I think I am of the of the mindset and of the belief system that if I sign up for something, I'm paying for it. I don't care whether I don't enjoy it or whether, to me, it's like you just pay, but that is not the thought process that goes on in other people's heads. But this is and this is the change for 2023. It's not that it doesn't happen now, but I think you're going to see it a hell of a lot more in 2023, is we're going to have more and more people defaulting on payments. But then in addition, also talking about online publicly for everyone to see how well they're doing and how much of an amazing time they're having. And this is something that, I just see as really being big next year. I can see the passive aggressiveness going to be very huge. It's going to be an interesting one, but I definitely can see that happening. Number 41 is that coaching and consulting online is going to become more mainstream, and this is a really good thing. So I see this becoming much more well known. It's going to be much more normalised. It's going to really, it's not going to be normal in the sense of I'm not saying your nan or your grand's going to know it, but I do think we're on this process, and that's happened somewhat this year, slightly, but we're going to, as we get into 2023 and 2024, that's really going to kind of continue. And the other thing to think about, kind of with that, I think actually there's another one. I think it's a point in its own about certification and creating, jobs and roles and stuff. So maybe we'll come on to that. But yeah, that's a really interesting piece. Number 42, we're talking about podcasts. So I believe next year, and this is going to be controversial because I think people disagree with me on this, people are going to want less interview style inspiration podcasts, right? I don't think people, I am burnt out. I was burnt out 2 years ago from listening to people bloody interview people, right? I'm sorry if you love them, but I just cannot sit and listen to them anymore. I was a person who listened to podcasts back in the day when they were no one knew what a podcast was really. I'm not saying I was the first one ever, but I was definitely the kind of 2000 and, I'm trying to think, 16 maybe crew? 15? I don't know. Back when no one knew what a podcast was. And so I loved an interview. I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. But scroll on however many years, I'm now a bit oh God, yawn. I can't stand the first bit where they introduce them. I can't stand, there's so much of it that I can't stand. And that's why one of the reasons we haven't had guests on this podcast, it's not that I'm against it. And then next year I am looking to do maybe a series or a one-off season or something with some guests, because I do want guests on the podcast, but I'm really picky in how it's going to work. And yeah, I don't know. I just think less interview and inspo stuff, and people want more just value. They want straight up, heavy, detailed stuff that is worth them giving up their time. Because I think the thing with a podcast is, right, you're giving up your time and your brain space to, listen to someone rattle on and talk. And that's with this podcast, right? You're listening, you've probably clicked on this because you know that this is going to be mega packed with info and value. It's not me saying, oh, he has 3 predictions. It's he has 55, and you're like, oh geez, I best listen to this. Surely in there somewhere there's going to be something that's interesting, right? That's a massive high value podcast, and I'd argue that pretty much every single one of the podcasts we have, which now there's over 40 episodes, is full of value. And that was something that I, again, this time last year sat and I had this prediction that I'm telling you today, but I thought it for 2023 back then, and I just was like, people are going to want value. That was why I didn't do guests. That was purposeful. We had a conversation around what is the podcast going to be, and I immediately said, I think in 12, 24 months, 36 months, podcast and interview things, it's not going to be the vibe. So I didn't do it. And I was like, no, we're not doing it. This is what we're doing because I believe it's the future. Now, am I trying to sound like some sort of Einstein? No, I can totally get it wrong, but I have a very innate feelings about things. and this was one of them. And I'm so proud of it. You know, this year I feel like we've delivered an exceptional podcast that we have, you know, people who listen every week, but also people who share it and people who are like, oh, this is actual a genuine resource, or this is really useful. And, you know, I'm sharing stuff on here that, you know, is worth a hell of a lot of money. Like, it's really good stuff, and that makes me very happy, and I love that it's free and, you know, all these things. But I think people want that more, right? They want detailed, heavy stuff. Like, so many people, or not so many, like a number of people have messaged me saying, this is my favourite podcast, or like, I love how in-depth you are on that. It's so worth listening to. And that for me is what's going to really keep listeners tuned in next year. I do think more podcasts are going to be videoed. Definitely, I think that's definitely going to continue on the rise. And I still genuinely think the podcasts are going to be huge. I think if you're thinking about starting a podcast, definitely do it. It's definitely not over for the podcast. I know some people were like, oh, is podcasting over? I don't think it is. I think people really love a podcast. I love a podcast. I definitely go through phases, but I love the power of just switching something on your phone and you learn something, but it's like you don't have to watch it. And yeah, I just think the true podcast is still alive and kicking as well. And it's going to be like really, you know, really still huge in 2023. Number 43 is systems and operations is going to grow, which is really exciting, and I'm excited for this. So I think people are going to take it more seriously, and I'm hoping that client experience is going to get better for a lot of us because hopefully, you know, people are going to prioritize it more. So the thing I always say with client experience is like, you don't know it's bad until you then revert back to something that's not so good, and then you're like, oh god, I forgot how annoying this is, right? So it's like, you know, if someone sends you a manual invoice, it's like, oh god, a manual invoice really irks me. I've got to go on my banking and add the person and do this. Like, I just want a link. Send me a link. Let me pay through, you know, pay through something. You know, let me pay on Stripe or whatever. So, you know, client experience, hopefully that will get better. Systems and operations, I think, is going to really have a moment. As it always does. It always kind of moves around and kind of is trendy, isn't trendy, whatever. But I think it's going to really grow in a big way, and people understanding the power of having a really optimized business and how much time that gives you back and how much kind of space that gives you in your business. I think people are also going to really shift systems wise, which I'm going to touch on later. But I think systems is going to have a big kind of overhaul and a kind of differentiator between, you know, what people are using now and what they maybe are using at the end of next year. So I'm excited about this. I think that's really good. And if you're someone who works in operations and systems, you're an OBM, you are, you know, an operations consultant, you are a VA, you know, a tech VA, you're someone who works in this area, I think you've got a really prosperous year ahead of you. Number 44, let's talk about teams. So this is something that's going to be very prominent next year, I believe, in people who have already got a decent business going, but they want to step it up a notch, they want to scale, and they also want to optimize the team and get more out of the thing, like the people that they're paying for and the people that they're creating groups for. So what's going to happen is teams are going to be utilized better, so that there's basically a switch from someone managing everything and overseeing everything to then understanding how to grow a department and then use that in the online space. So at the moment in teams, for, you know, in the online space, people who have big businesses, it's still often quite a flat structure, in the sense of like everyone just talks to the main person and there's not much middle management, or there's not much kind of collaboration across departments. What we're going to see is there's going to be a change in that, and I really hope so, because it's much better. And, you know, you're going to have it where people actually talk to each other outside of the person who owns the business. So it's like market and operations talk to each other. Now, this is happening now. I'm not saying it's not happening at all, but you're going to see a lot more of that talked about. You're going to see a lot more of it shown to you in practice and kind of displayed. And, you know, this year in the business, that's something that's massively happened at May James, and that's been really good. Maybe something I talk about, you know, at a later date, but it's very powerful and it's very useful. But I think, again, that's like a secondary team kind of development phase, which a lot of businesses are going to get to next year, and that'll be where they kind of are and they place themselves, so that's fun. Number 45 is about team again. There's going to be less switching of team members if they get the hiring right, if they get the management right, but that's a whole other situation. There's going to be more kind of cementing into particular roles, and what I mean by that is people are finally going to also see the value of having like one really good person instead of having 6 half alright people, and they're going to see the value of having one person who can do a lot of things instead of having like multiple different people. Now, that's not me saying you should only have one person in your team, no. But what I'm saying is people are going to get more pickier and also like really just stay with the people they've got and actually invest time and actually admit that they might not be the best leader, and they're going to work on their leadership so that they can lead a team better. Because a lot of the time in the online space, it's like people are churning through team members like there's no tomorrow. Half of it's because the people who, you know, the main person running the business doesn't know how to manage them because they're a contractor, and so they think, oh well, I can't manage them, or I don't know how to manage them, or it's not my responsibility to manage them, which is absolute rubbish. So that is going to be like a really big thing for next year, and that's good because, you know, it's going to help businesses hugely, and it'll help people, you know, actually make sure that they're getting the use and the purpose that they hired people for in the first place. Number 46 is again about team, and this is about management. And what is going to happen is, in the online space, there's going to be a lot more traditional management styles and structures introduced, which is interesting. So essentially what's going to happen is you're going to look at how do you increase performance, because a lot of people are going to be at a point where they're making a lot of money. They might be making 7 figures, they might be making multi-6 figures, they might be making 8 figures. There is an element where we get, I don't want to say greedy, but we get used to a certain income level, and then people are like, right, well, we're either going to make X amount more or we're going to hire a shitload more team, or, well, why don't we just improve our profit margin? Why don't we improve our bottom line? Why do we, you know, why can't I get more out of this person I'm paying a salary for? Because I'm paying a salary and I'm paying tax, and so I've got to get, you know, the most out of them. What that is then going to look like is people are going to start realising that they've built businesses but the foundations are really rocky, and so they then need to learn about how do we manage people and what is the best structure. And, you know, it's not duplicatable from traditional business model because it doesn't always work. It's about merging two together and fusing them together, which is something I help people with, and I can help you do it if you're listening to this and thinking, God, yeah, I need to do that. It's nuanced, it's kind of particular, but it is worth doing and worth looking at. And so, yeah, increasing whole team performance, and, you know, this whole idea of increasing by 1% and getting everybody 1% better, like, that is going to be a real theme for next year, and it's something that'll pay people back massively if they invest well into it. Number 47 is about offers and offer creation, and this is interesting. So what is going to happen is there's going to be a lot more holistic offers. So what that means is it's like people trying to offer everything, a bit of like mindset, a bit of business, a bit of life. It's like a 360 kind of package where you buy an all-in-one thing, and it's like with one person, and it kind of doesn't just help your business, but it helps your life, and it helps your family, and it helps your love life, and it helps like everything basically. And this becomes attractive because people are overwhelmed and they just want to buy one thing, and it's attractive because if they can just spend, you know, 10 grand and it has everything in it versus spending like 5 grand here and this thing here and that thing there, like, it all makes sense. Yeah, so that's going to be interesting, and I really see the power in that, because there is a lot of times where, you know, me for example, we could create incredible programs that are more holistic, that don't just look at business, and would be really powerful and great. We haven't done that, and there's a few reasons as to why, but it's definitely something I'm not against, and it's not something I'm, you know, I definitely would look at. It's not on the list for 2023, but, you know, it's an interesting idea, and I think there's a lot of value in it. I think it's really hard to get right. I think there's a lot of thought needs to go into it. I think there's a lot of like not so great ones, but there's a nice place for collaboration there. You know, when we talk about collaboration in part 1, that's a really lovely way to kind of fuse things together and collaborate on something like that. Number 48 is about platforms and systems in the online space in general. I believe we are going to move away from using one platform, which is really sad, but this year has been a funny old year. So what I'm talking about basically is, instead of using something like Kartra, which is what I use, it's what many people use, it's what many big businesses use in the online space, there's other ones available, like Kajabi, for example. You know, there's many others. People are going to move away from that, and they're going to start adding back the old school way of having a couple of different systems. Many reasons for that. One of the biggest ones is that Kartra's just been an absolute pain in the arse this year, and has not been good and not been reliable, and people have lost a lot of money, and there's been various issues. Kartra's not the only one, but that is the one that is really high on people's kind of frustration list. For the size of my business and how we use it, I actually haven't had any issues personally, or not any. We've had one or two, but nothing massive or drastic, but I totally get why, you know, for some people it is a massive issue. I think you're going to then see a massive rise in WordPress, And you're going to see a massive rise in traditional people literally building out what they want and coding, which is very exciting. I think that's going to massively come from the big industry players in terms of the online space. I'm not saying that everyone's going to start bloody WordPress coding their courses, but the people who have the money to do so will, and that's exciting. But in a more simpler way, you know, you're going to have something where there is a checkout and then there's a kind of hosted on Teachable and then there's something else and something else. That is going to become a lot more. I just think people are, you know, we all want an all-in-one. Like, I want an all-in-one program, which is the next person, I really do. But the top and bottom of it is the technology is not there yet. No one has managed to do it correctly. Carter, in my opinion, was the best shot and is the best option, but is not performant at the level it needs it to be. We had to move. We added a platform in this year for email marketing because we'd sat for so long trying to deal with Carter and it just would not work. So we'd already started on this journey of kind of moving away from one platform. That being said, I still do recommend Carter for a number of things, but that's a different episode in itself. You know, it's fantastic for certain things, but not for others. We definitely added 3 programs or systems, I think, this year, 4, that we didn't have at the start of the year, based on this idea of I knew this was going to happen. This was before all the issues with Carter had started, to be honest, but as a business we took a decision that I wasn't happy with. I just had this feeling, which I know throughout these things I'm like, I have this feeling, and a lot of the time they're right, like I was with this one with Carter. And so we started migrating anyway, but I still use Carter. It's still part of our business, and it will be in 2023. I don't have any. It's not on the top of the list to move straight away, and it's not on the list at all actually to completely move. It'd be nice to get my bill down though. I feel like it's quite a hefty chunk every month, isn't it? I don't know what you probably listen to this. You might be on it yourself. I used to have the cheapest one, which is still, I think, is it $97 or something, but we're definitely not on that anymore. So yeah, the Carter thing, especially, you know, I don't pay huge amounts. Some people are paying massive amounts of money and the service is really not great. So that is not good. So yes, that's going to be a thing. Number 49. Oh, this is a huge one. This is going to rattle some people, I think. We're going to talk about this. I'm going to try not to talk about it as if I'm so annoyed and drained from it, as if I've been talking about it for years and years, because no shit, Sherlock, we have. But here we go. Anyway, let's go for this one. Number 49. We are going to see a trend in 23 where people suddenly wake up and have this realization and start hiring people to help them in their business, not based on how much money they earn. Now, this is a weird thing that really triggers people, and that's okay if you're listening to this and really disagree with me. That's totally fine. Everyone's allowed to have their ideas and their opinion. But what I mean is that the ideology around people having to have done something themselves before they can teach it will die off. Now, I am not saying that someone who doesn't have a clue about business should then start teaching about business. Obviously, that's wrong. Obviously, that makes zero sense. But what I'm saying is, there's this bizarre mentality that goes on, which doesn't go on in other industries, may I add, where it's like, okay, I want to make £1 million, so I'm going to go and only work with someone who's made £1 million. Now, that's a bad example, because that, you know, I'm not saying that that's wrong or right. I'm not saying that you why wouldn't you? What I'm saying is people who are professionals and experts are that. They're an expert and they're professional. But it doesn't mean they're an expert and professional in the specific thing. What I'm basically saying is lawyers, for example, right? A lawyer can have 10 different cases and every single case is completely random and different in a random industry, in a random thing. They have no clue a lot of the time about the specifics of that, but they're there to do a job because they have a skill set and they have a process that they have to follow. That is not very different from a lot of what goes on in the online space in terms of people have skills and expertise and people need a solution. But what has happened, and for years had been this narrative of well, the person who's helping you has to have done it. It's well, that doesn't always really make sense. And actually, a lot of the time is massively riddled in kind of psychological problems and all sorts of biases and issues with, do we go into this or not? But I don't know, just confirmation bias and all sorts of stuff that can be very toxic and negative for the person who's paying for advice. But yeah, you know, there's a whole kind of conversation to be had. As I've said, I just want to make it clear, I'm not saying that people should start taking advice off random people who don't have a clue, but what I'm saying is the true experts, people who are dedicated to their craft, not dedicated to going and chasing money or chasing this thing or that thing. Money's just the first thing that comes to mind because it's the one that people think about the most. But there's other key players in characteristics, is that what I'm trying to say, in that around, like, people will, like, start to wake up and realise that doesn't always make sense and actually that it's not necessary, which I think is interesting. That's going to be a really interesting thing. One thing I would say is that can go drastically the wrong way and can be abused and not go well. But yeah, we'll see how that one pans out. Number 50, resilience. Let's talk about resilience. So the resilience and resiliency and being resilient is going to be the next, like, go-to skill. Emotional intelligence this year was kind of, I would argue, probably the one for this year. Next year it's going to be resilience. And it's going to be marketed to the hilt. I mean, I'm excited about it because I'm a huge, massive, like, you know, flag flyer for resilience, because that is literally why I'm still here standing. This is why I still have a business. It's why I run multiple businesses. Like, the only reason I'm here today sat recording this is because of how strong and weirdly strong my resilience skills are. So I'm not against that. I think it's good. It's of course going to be used wrongly and, like, you know, not in good ways, but I'm trying not to think about that. You know, if we can build more resilient children, adults, everybody, any human being, we will end up with a better world. So I really, you know, think it's a good thing, and I'm excited to see how that kind of takes kind of shape. Number 51, I am going to try not to go on a rant with this one. I really am. Right. I debated even just taking this one out completely because I know this is really triggering for people. I'm just going to read out. Oh God, can I read out what I've just wrote on this notes app? Certifications. Let's just talk about certifications, should we? This is what I meant before when I was talking about consulting and coaching becoming mainstream and stuff like that. This is linked. So certifications are going to continue to rise. They are going to absolutely explode. This year we saw them really grow, but we're not done seeing them. It's going to get bigger. Now, the reason I am so cynical about it, and I've wrote on here, certifications will continue to rise and piss me off and be crap/useless. Again, let me just disclaimer this. I'm not saying that every single certification is crap and useless. I'm not saying that if you have one, yours is rubbish. I'm not saying that you're a bad person for selling one. I'm not, you know, like, each to their own, right? There's some fantastic, amazing ones. My issue I have with them is that it's essentially a money-making activity for those involved a lot of the time. It essentially is people repackaging courses and then getting someone to add a different section and understand this and take things and do this, and that is not bad, right? Can I just say, that is not bad. It's just, people think they're, like, being, like, a real, like, mover and shaker in the industry by doing this, and then it's going to help people become, like, more integrity and be more ethical. I'm just sat here like, is it though? Is it? Really? Because I massively argue it doesn't. When you look at, let's just take a step back a minute without this becoming a full-blown rant. This industry, the coaching and consulting industry, coaching especially, needs to be regulated. This is where this whole certification thing's come from. It's come from people who've got really good hearts, who really want to, like, massively help people, but is sick of seeing people get scammed and sick of people getting, you know, rubbish customer service and rubbish experiences and losing money. So this all comes from a really great place, and people are like, right, well, it needs to be, you know, certified. People need to be certified. People need to be this. People need to be that. And that on the surface level sounds great, right? I'm totally on board. Like, I'm like, yeah, this is great. Like, we all need it. Let's do it. Let's do it. My issue comes with the certifications themselves are not regulated. So, like, I've got multiple ones and I've never, like, really actually done much. Like, literally, I bought them and it was like an added bonus. It was like, oh, you got this as well and you're now certified. Something. Like, that whole thing is bizarre to me. Like, that's weird. The certifications themselves are not certified, essentially. Then there's certification boards popping up that are in themselves there as a money-making experience, because you've got to remember that now there's loads and loads of people trying to certify programs, which then becomes this whole business in itself. You've then got institutions and certification boards that are, you know, industry standard or are well-respected, renowned places that are now receiving new and accepting new things that I would argue, if you took it from an academic perspective, is not of the standard or quality or correct stature that it should be, or that it once was 5 years ago. Again, I don't want to sound like some kind of old person who's like, oh, we can't move forward in the world, but it doesn't sit well with me. There's a lot of things in this industry that I struggle with when it comes to certifications. Yeah, it's a difficult one without me going into it massively. I've considered doing a one myself because people have asked, can you bundle up the May James method? And, can we create mini May Jameses essentially, right? Because what we do with business is massively impactful and it's huge to do that. And I've had clients who've come to me and said, look, have started, as part of their business model, added on kind of like coaching a consultant, and have come and said, look, I feel like I'm ripping you off. I feel like I've signed a contract that says I will not do this and I will not do that and I will not do that. And they're like, I feel like I am. And we've had conversations and, I've been very kind of open with them about various things, which I'm not going to go into right now. They were like, are you going to do a certification? Are you going to create something for people who want to be a coach or consultant and do it in a really amazing leading way? And it would make sense for me to, but I'm not going to. And I might change my mind on that, and that's fine if I do, but right now it's a no. But yeah, this certification palaver, and I think I've spoken about this before, about the kind of money situation and how it fits nicely into people's business models to add in certifications because it's another point in people's journey that they can kind of access another point of that, which, if that doesn't make sense, what I'm essentially saying is we have a real trend where you help people to start a business. So you have that. Then you have people to scale a business or grow a business. And then you end up, but then there's always a saturation point. And there's always a point where you're like, well, how do I get more and more and more out of the same customer? Then people are like memberships. And then there was this whole membership thing. And everyone's like, oh, okay. Well, not, how do we get another high ticket sale out of them? Right, mastermind. Then where do we go from there? And there's this cycle, right, that goes on. Now, again, none of that's bad. That's totally fine. However, there was then this whole phenomenon of like, okay, well, certification's great. We can have people who are at the start of their journey and have never done anything and don't have a business, and we can sell them the dream of, building a business or exploring a skill and, whatever, great. And then you've also got the joy of being able to sell it to people who are in your world and who love you and who, if I brought it out, there'd be a lot of my clients would be like, yeah, let's do it. Like, why not? I totally get it. I've been part of the May James kind of method, if you will, but I want to share that with other people. So then you get an extra sale off the people who already love you, and that's another great high ticket thing, right? Now, again, this is all sounding very cynical, but I'm just trying to explain very shortly. I could go into this for literally an hour about how this all works. So then you end up with a massive more spend because remember, I don't know if we said into part one, people want to learn, people are eager to learn, people want to upskill, people love upskilling, people love adding another thing to their bow. Do you know why? Because it means people don't have to sell, or they think they don't. They do, but they think I'm just going to add this other thing and then everyone's going to want to work with me and I'm going to have this amazing business and it's all going to be so great. People get really wrapped up in stuff, right? People are like, yes, this is going to be amazing. Everyone's going to think I'm great. People go and do PhD for this reason, right? Let's just put that out there. This is not a new concept. This idea of certification and why people would buy one is not new at all. It's been around for centuries, but it's coming to force in a new way, and then people are making a hell of a lot of money off them. Can I also just say, there's some people who do certifications and they do them really well, and they're great, but there's also a whole host where it's not great. Now, going back to my point about industries and certifications, when you look at the data about certifications and what it does to industries, because remember the whole point a lot of people are doing them is because they want a really good regulated thing and they want everyone to have a good experience. That doesn't happen. It does not happen, sadly. It is massively fraudulent, massively corrupt, massive issues, it doesn't work most of the time. Am I saying that then we shouldn't just bother at all and what's the point? No, but what I am saying is we are doing this to become less of a scammy industry and for it to look more prestigious and valued. But my argument is we still haven't found a solution. We're just kind of adding more noise, and I'm just not convinced we found it. I think what needs to happen when people then turn around me and say, well, what is the solution? The solution, I think, is, and again, I don't have the full solution, but my thought process is that there's room for a new model. There's room for a new item, whether I'm not sure if it is a certification, I'm not sure if it's accreditation, I'm not sure if it's, it needs to be something else in its own right. That is an independent body. For example, Ofsted. How we have in the UK something called Ofsted, which is for schools, and they get kind of monitored and they get kind of regulated. Now, even in that itself, it's corrupt in some ways, but something like that makes more sense to me than having people individually have certifications or as businesses have certifications. There's just this disconnect that doesn't make sense personally. However, that is just my thought process, and a very brief one at that. I could literally talk about this for ages and ages. Yeah, it's a very interesting one, that. Certifications also give, like, false confidence to a lot of people. Or, like, the best one I have, right, bearing in mind, like, I'm a business expert. I'm a business growth scaling expert. You give me a business, give me 5 minutes, I'll have a plan for you, I'll have a strategy. Give me an hour, let's take over the world. Like, I can have it mapped out and be like, right, ready to go. What I've struggled with is then people sell, like, become a business strategist or become a business consultant. And then you go and look at the certification, and essentially it's what's on a business degree, right? And again, nothing wrong with it. We've got a SWOT model, you've got this thing, you've got this thing, you've got audience building, you've got, how do you look at industry market fit? You might have a bit of accounting, you've got, like, that's fine, right? So you've got these, like, things, and they're essentially what's on a degree a lot of the time, business degree. And bear in mind, I've done a business degree. I studied for 4 years. I understand how it works. But it's the same thing with people who get a degree, right? It's like, people who get a degree means nothing unless you've actually, like, done something with it or actually use it in some way. It was like, I did a business degree for 4 years. Did I learn much from the content of the degree itself? No. But what I did do is I spent 4 years, because I'm weird, and I learned about business from what I knew I needed to learn. Like, I went and studied way beyond what I didn't really study what was supposed to be honest, but I was like, I'm taking this time and I'm going to learn business. And so I really went down rabbit holes and really went into, like, advanced things. And that's why today, I am young and and some people say, like, have you got so much wisdom or so much knowledge and so much this? And, like, one, I've actually physically done stuff. Two, I've worked and actually grafted, but also, I spent a long time of, like, really analysing and going through things. And so, yeah, that is my other issue of, like, sorry, I haven't really said the point, have I? My issue is around this idea that, like, let's just say me and someone else both have a title of a business consultant, let's just say that, and we both get given a business. Let's say it's the same business. How I would approach that, and how I would, the output you're going to get from me versus the output you're going to get from someone who's been through the certification is likely to be miles apart, right? Now, that's fine, because obviously, like, there's different people at different points in their journey, that's okay. But to me, in my head, I'm like, well, that just doesn't make sense, right? Because I'm like, what I essentially do is, in my day-to-day work, do we share this? Yeah, let's go on, let's do it. I'm just thinking of the time, but whatever, we'll try and make it short. Say, like, a SWOT analysis or gap analysis or something like that. Like, I'm doing that in my head, basically, while someone's talking to me. And I can only do that on my head in speed, like, massive speed, sped up, because I'm an expert and because I know what I'm talking about and because I've done it and I've really got the reps in, right? So I don't, in my work, present people with a SWOT. Like, I would never turn up and be like, okay, here we go, let's go through this. Or we never go through a pet analysis, or we never go through, like, all these models, basically, of, like, how would you help grow a business. They just come into my head as, like, part and factors, but then I create it into a process that makes business really simple, and that's what people always say to me. They come to me because it's like, you make business really simple, you make complex business simple, you get results. That all comes because that's what people are paying me for, is a brain in my head, and I can do it on, like, micro-fast speed, and I can do it with multiple businesses, like a Maze Accelerator, right? Maze Accelerator is a group program we have, and we have businesses that are from different industries, and on one call, we can go through all the different ones, and people are all over the world, and people have got wild different problems. So it's like, someone's got a team problem, someone's got a sales problem, someone's got a content problem. And that's fascinating to watch, I think, for people in terms of my brain, because it's like, I can just switch so quickly. And that's because I'm an expert, right? What people don't get is, like, me just sitting there telling someone a SWOT is not going to help them. It'll help them understand it a bit better, and they'll be like, oh, cool, yeah. It makes them sound quite fancy. They'll be like, oh, fun. That will not get them the result that I get people. And that's my issue with certifications and things, because I'm like, what exactly are we actually then is the output? We then just create an industry of people putting out deliverables, putting out items, putting out 30-page long, this is what I'm presenting to you. And it's like, okay, great, but what does that then mean? And we end up back at a traditional consultant model where people pay 6 figures and get absolutely nout. And I'm saying that figuratively in the sense of you go to McKinsey or a different big 4 consultant firm and, you know, you can spend 6 figures plus multiple 6 figures and get a presentation at the end of it with some recommendations on. You know, that's not what we do at Mary James. But part of that is because I do so much of it internally in my head. And what I struggle with from the concept of certifying loads of people, and this is why I haven't done the certification thing, that's why I just don't know if we'd ever be able to do it, is because I'm not sure how teachable that is. In the sense of, I can't promise that on a certification program in a state of X amount of weeks. Like, there's so much of, you know, consulting and coaching is a industry of expertise, right? You're selling your expertise. I'm not sure I'm buying into this idea that anyone who fancies being a business strategist can just randomly be a business strategist. I'm not saying that you can't. I'm just saying that it is very nuanced. But the idea of putting thousands of people through a certification because we have an industry that's growing and that, you know, people need serving and there's a demand, I'm just not convinced it is good for the industry in the sense of longer term, where does that leave you? When you look at an industry growth cycle of 10, 15 years, it doesn't really make sense from a maturity stage of where you're going to get to. Now, this is getting very complex and you're probably not interested. Most of you have switched off by now. You'd be like, what is she rambling on about? But yeah, I'm open for discussion and debate about certifications. I'm not saying that they're the worst things in the world, but I'm, as you can probably tell, I'm not flying the flag for them either. It's a very difficult one. And again, it's all about nuance, right? And it's all about tone, and it's all about this idea that people... Sorry, I'm not farting, by the way, if you can hear that. It's my arm on the desk. I don't know how much you can hear. You can probably hear the whole lot, but it sounds quite questionable. You know, and I'm happy to have I love having conversations with people who do have certifications and who are really passionate about it. And I'm always open to learning because, you know, it's important. You know, it is. And as I say, I might pull one out of the bag one day and be like, hey, come and do the certification. So we shall see. I know some people really want me to, so we shall see. Right, we're nearly at the end. You're still with me. I can't believe we're an hour and 10 minutes into this. Okay, let's keep going. 52. Right, passive income building will be bigger than ever. This is going to be interesting, but there is a twist to this. So next year, passive income is going to be a big one. It's going to be a lot of shaming next year around if you don't have passive income in your business, then you don't really own a business. Or if you don't make consistent money from passive income every month, then you haven't got a business. You've just got this constant attachment to a job, or, you know, all sorts of random statements will be used, no doubt, in a negative light to make people feel bad, which you really don't need to feel bad. So just FYI, before this all comes in and everyone's panics, building passive income is really important in your business. It's great if you can. Building semi-passive income is a lot more realistic for a lot of people. And again, great. On a sustainable, consistent month-to-month level, fantastic. Yes, you need to prioritize it. However, you know, don't be made to feel horrendous if you actually have to go and do some work to make money. That's very normal. That's normal. It's been happening for ages. It's normal. So don't panic and do not feel bad, because I know that's going to be a big thing. But this is my differentiating point of 2023 with passive income. People are going to want to find alternative ways to make it less draining. That is going to be the switch. So for 2023, there's going to be a lot more chatter around how do we make it interesting? How do we find different things to look at and different options? And how can we do it in a way that feels less like we're climbing up the biggest mountain in the world? Because so many people attempt to do passive income and then it stops. As in, they are going to do digital products, they're going to do a course, they're going to do this, they're going to do a membership, whatever, right? They're going to do a subscription box, something like that. Actually executing on that can be really difficult and hard unless you've got a massive support team or, you know, accountability and things like that. It's not impossible. Some people do it every year. Of course, it's so doable. But I'm just being realistic in the sense of so many people start with good intentions and don't actually do it. So then there's a problem, right? Then there's a thing that someone can come and fix and be like, right, okay, then this is the new way and this is an alternative way. And that's exciting because I think it's good. I think we need innovation. I think, you know, passive income's kind of become a bit of a people are kind of sick of hearing about it somewhat because they're like, oh, I know I need to do it, but I haven't really done it. And I think it's going to have a bit of a resurgence, a bit of a revival. Not that it's gone anywhere, but just it's going to feel fresher and there's going to be kind of alternative ways of of looking at it, which I think's fun and good because, you know, it's massive, it's amazing. And, you know, I'm very lucky that, I say very lucky, I've made it happen myself to have very semi-passive income, and it never fails me, you know, when I wake up in the morning and, you know, something's sold and I've made some money, it's like, oh, mega, I've been asleep, and that's fantastic. Like, and I'm never going to be dismissive of passive income because it's really fantastic. Semi-passive income's amazing, but I think there's going to be a kind of resurgence in the way of like making it feel fresh and achievable for people. Number 53. Oh, this one's a bit negative, but I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. In 2023, this is going to be huge. I actually think this is going to be huge in kind of end of Q1, Q2, and then quite big in Q3, but like kind of summertime basically, right? Victim mentality is going to rise. So what I mean by that is like people feeling like the world like got something in for them and that they're so hard done to, and then this is really hard and that's really hard and this is crap and this has happened and this shouldn't happen and everything's out of my control type vibe. And self-responsibility is going to be low. So you're going to have victim mentality high, self-responsibility low, action taken will become low. Sorry if that was really loud. Action taken. Yeah, that's going to be a very interesting thing. And I'm kind of moving my hands here, but I forget you can't see. So, you know, what I'm basically saying here is this is a cycle. So what happens is people fall into this like woe is me state for whatever reason. And often that's valid reasons, right? I'm not saying that like you're a bad person if you do this, because it's very human nature to do it. Like it's quite normal, right? But you fall into some kind of low and you fall off the wagon and you feel quite like, oh, and this. And I have clients, right? Everybody goes through this. I have it. I have to snap myself out of it. Like this, I'm not saying I'm immune or anyone's immune. Like we all go through this, but it's about recognizing it, right? So you can be in this real like victim mentality mode of like, oh, this, that, and the other. And like I have to snap people out of it and have to point out and be harsh and be really real with people. And people often then appreciate it. And like, thank God for saying that 2 months down the line when they're out of it. But at the time, it's like really difficult conversation. And often they don't like me for saying it. But then, as I say, down the line, they're like, thank goodness for doing that for me. So you get in this state of like negative Nelly, you're really not happy. It's like, what then happens from that, the action that then comes from that is self-responsibility becomes low. So self-leadership, self-accountability, that all just drops. And so you end up with this very like low baseline. Then the next knock-on effect of that is the action that you put into building your business and taking action just falls off a cliff. That can be just non-existent for some people. And so you just go from having like a slightly bad thing happen to then it just completely falling. And this can go over a number of days, weeks, months. You know, I've even seen it happen over a year, right? And often you don't know you're in this. It's very hard to identify. You've got to be incredibly self-aware to do that. But even then, it's hard, right? So you then, you know, this is the whole thing of having a coach or having someone, advisor or someone there, because they can kind of point that out and be like, whoa, what's going on here? And kind of point something out. And often you like have no clue what's going on. So that is something that I think we're going to see. It also kind of matches because it fits for people with the whole recession thing and this thing and that thing. And it's like, it's all, you know, negativity breeds negativity and people jump on it like no tomorrow. So that was something that will be present. We are nearly there, people. We're nearly there. Right. We're getting there. 54. Longer form video will come back, but there's a but. I think it's going to be the type of side that shows like personal stuff. So it's going to be behind the scenes stuff. It's like insight into people and individuals and leaders. And it's going to be very like documentary style. And people are going to want to like see depth, right? And this is what comes from people wanting to know more about people and people wanting to understand what goes on and the human instinct. And this is why I was saying that people, you know, the whole thing about podcasts and people not wanting this interview style, I think this is what's going to replace it. So it's going to shift from people talking in a somewhat formal capacity in terms of a podcast, and I think it's going to switch to like raw, long form videos, chatty vlog type things, or, you know, like leadership insights into people that you're like, oh, I want to know what this person does, and seeing what actually happens. That is really going to take like a big move. I think personally it's going to happen towards the end of 2023 and more into like 2024, 2025. Some of you, if you're eagerly eyed, I don't know what the saying is. Who knows? We'll see that we this year did behind the scenes on YouTube, which was season 1 of Behind the Scenes at May James, which was a vlog series that we've done 10 episodes of this year. If you haven't seen it, go to YouTube, you can type in May James Business and I think it pops up and you can find our channel and you can subscribe. And there are 10 episodes for you to watch. That is purposeful why we've done that. Like, again, we started that in the summer, I think it was, the conversation began back in, let me think. That was written to do last year and it never got done last year. It took basically 18 months longer than it was meant to, but hey ho, we got there. And we did the first series and, it's been great and I'm really happy that we committed to it and followed through with it and did it. So that's great. Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to really be quick because my laptop says it's running out of battery. No, this is bad. Okay, let's quickly go through it because I don't want to lose this. Oh my goodness, how do I make sure I don't lose it? Right, okay, let's keep going. So that's going to be number 55 is implementation support and accountability programs will rise and be sold as the next answer to the thing you've been missing. That kind of says all I need to say. Year of Clarity is that. I know I've talked about Year of Clarity before. We start in January. I've been doing that since last year. I think people are going to catch on and be like, oh my God, yes, this makes total sense. And yes, they add this into their programs anyway, but I think there's going to be a lot more of this new style of program where it's like not education, it's not about curriculum, it's about actually doing stuff, it's about actually making shit happen and doing all the stuff that people are not doing, because we're going to reach this kind of information capacity and saturation, which we kind of already have. And that was kind of last year, but then people then still went for it. So then we're going to reach a point where people are like, I actually need to do something with the information, otherwise I'm not going to get results. That's my thought on that. Then I have number 56, which I know was supposed to be 55, but I really cut like so many. We had about 70, I think, and I cut loads of them, and I couldn't cut this one off the bottom, so we're adding this in as a bonus one. Number 56 is people will desire done-for-you written strategy that is bespoke, but this is not going to come until 2024, 2025, in my opinion. This brings me lots of joy because this is essentially what I do for people, and the people who have caught on to this early have been benefiting from it for ages, which is great. I've done a lot more strategy writing this year than I did in previous years, but next year I'm going to continue to do it because I really enjoy it. So that's something like CEO Strategy Day, is something like an intensive, but not really an intensive, like I verbally do it on that. One-to-one consultant. Those containers is where, you get, or physical, just people will have like a consultant offer for that. But yeah, that is going to happen. Done for you written strategy. People are going to actually understand the power of having a physical written strategy to follow and stick to and do. And that's very exciting. And I know some of you also do it, so that's also fun for you. Right, I'm going to go in case this cuts out. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please come and talk to me. Tag me in something on Instagram. Tell me that you've listened. Share it with your friends. Share it with your business pals. Don't steal it and then say it's yours. I'm joking. Well, yeah, I'm kind of joking. I'm kind of not. You can if you want, but it'd be great if you reference me. This is no doubt. People will then just take this and have it as their own. But yeah, please share, rate, review. I'll catch you in the new year. I'm going to take a break from the podcast. We're going to have a little break. I will be back though. Subscribe. And I've got there's so much planned. We've got about 10 episodes, I think, planned out. I'm ready for the new year. So super excited about it. It's going to be fabulous. Yeah. Thanks for listening this year. I appreciate you. I hope you're having a lovely time. Take care and I'll speak to you soon. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Honest Business Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you are subscribed. And if you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with others and leave a rating and review. To catch up with all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at may.james_, where I share the raw, uncut, behind the scenes reality of what running multiple businesses every day truly looks like. As always, links and any resources that were mentioned in the episode will be in the show notes below. That's all for this episode, and I look forward to seeing you next time.